I need to, yeah, but I need to be able to see the slides. So I either need to be here or there. So if I'm here, I need to see the slides.
There, you want to move the mic?
Yeah.
That works.
No, I'm going to put this down here because I don't want it to. Yeah, I was looking for a bottle of water, but there wasn't any. And I didn't remember to put any in my satchel. But oh, because I. Okay, because I need to be able to see what you got. Yeah. All right. Oh, there's Emily. Oh, okay. Yeah. 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 Yes. So I'll go kind of this way so I can see.
If you want to, can you grab it?
Is this, does this one work? Does this work? Oh yeah, I could hear it. I have to test. Oh, okay.
Good morning. I'm Steve Colvin. I'm a member of the arts team here at First Church, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our March Arts Forum, which is one of the things that the arts team does. The Arts Forum meets on the third Sundays of each month, so we're trying to have something different each month, and we have an exciting one for you today with Miss Penny Sterling. It will end promptly at 11:15, and if you have further discussions or want to talk more with Penny after that, you're welcome to do that in the in Channing Hall. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Penny.
Thank you. So when I was asked to give a talk for the Arts Forum, I thought, I don't do social justice work, and a lot of times that's what the Arts Forum was really about, is talking about arts and social justice. And I don't do that, but I thought, well, maybe since I'd made this card, that they wanted me to talk about that, but it didn't start out as a social justice. It's just a happy accident that it ended up that way. Now, about the same time, I was looking over this old book of mine, and my grandfather had given it to me shortly before he died, and my parents told me to be very careful with it. The author wrote my name in the book, and when I looked at it a little closer, I realized it was actually my first sketchbook. And this is probably the best drawing I've ever done in my life because it's a single line. It probably starts at the bottom of the ear where the color is darker and goes around the trunk, the front of the face, goes up over the back, and there's 3 dots, and you know exactly what it is. It's a really great drawing. So I thought, and actually the whole book is full of drawings, and I'm sure that I did it because I didn't let anybody else touch it. So I thought, well, I'll just talk about the evolution or the journey of a line from this drawing to this card. And also I thought, well, how does a person get there? You go to school, you're given opportunities to learn about a lot of different mediums, materials, your teacher gives you problems to solve, and then you're not in school anymore and you have to figure it out for yourself. So what do you do? And this is the story of kind of how I got there. When I was 25 years old, that summer that I turned 25, my ex-husband, was working on the Early Man Project in East Africa, headed by Richard Leakey, who was our age and felt that spouses should be included if they could figure it out. So I figured it out, and I went on that trip. And when I got there, I realized really there was nothing for me to do except work on my artwork. So the first drawing shows, from that sketchbook, shows that I'm interested in science, in plants, in how things are put together, and also pen and ink. The next drawing is a failure. I really thought that I should do watercolor, and this is a failure. Failures are really important because they show you where you should stop spinning your wheels and do something that you do better at. The next drawing is very lyrical. It's some weeds. This shows more the direction that I should be going. And note the little lines on the edges of the sketchbook. That's because this was done with a Crow Quill pen, which was on my list of supplies when I was in high school. And I still use a Crow Quill pen. That's my main tool. But it's real hard to use because the point will break and split, and you'll end up with ink all over. So the next slide is of my boys. We moved to Houston. And in Houston, I got a job working with an advertising designer. And so this drawing was actually done with a Rapidiograph. And it was fun working with advertising because you're solving problems again, even though they're somebody else's problems. So the next, and also what happened about that same time is someone asked me to teach a course in graphics at University of St. Thomas, and I was so intimidated at the thought of such a broad subject that I took a class in etching at Glassell School, and so then not too much later, I had the opportunity to work at the only printing studio in Houston that worked with professional artists, and I ended up as a master printer. This photograph is by Frank Martin, and it is at the Museum of Fine Arts, and I took it off of the internet, so it's a little blurry. But that is me with Earl Staley talking about a print and explaining some technicalities of etching to David Folkman, who's the master printer and lithographer. Etching is a very old way of printing. Rembrandt could have gone into my shop and had no problem figuring things out. So the next slide is this is a drawing, but it's also the happy accident of working with all those artists at Little Egypt, because then I had access to large pieces of paper and the freedom to let the Croquill pen point break and splatter ink, and just, but you can see also that I'm still interested in science and how seeds are manufactured, how it works, but the freedom to use that Croquill pen however it worked. The next slide is of an etching. This is a female and male loofah flower, and etching was a good fit for me because it involves lines, and my work is very linear. Etching is also great because you've got metal and acid working together or against each other, so that there's more space for things to happen, such as what I was doing with the broken pen points. Now, by now, I've earned money in the arts, by advertising design, by teaching, and by working as a master printer, and by selling my own work. But none of them made much money. So I went back to school and I became a registered nurse, because as a nurse, I knew that I could work 3 days a week, 12-hour shifts, and I'd still have 4 days a week in the studio. So it's hard to figure out exactly how you're going to earn money with. And I will finally be talking some about social justice artwork, and also how we got to the cards. This is a print of mine. It is kind of, it's a photo etch. I didn't usually use photo work. I liked to have my print studio pretty much like a Rembrandt studio, but sometimes I get somebody else to help me with photo etch. This is Alice. Alice is a very smart, well-educated girl, and the adults around her give her all the wrong tools and tell her to play a game. So here, she is supposed to play croquet, and she's supposed to do it with a hedgehog and a flamingo, and of course it won't work. And the title of that is Sex Education USA. There is a quote there of Lewis Carroll that says, "Alice soon discovered it was a very difficult game indeed," which also applies to sex education in the United States. So that is about, the problem with working with social justice issues and visual arts, or any of the arts, is you have to be explicit, and my work is usually too subtle for it. The next pictures, I don't know whether they go, and they go together in a long, the whole thing is about 10 or 12 feet long. It's a very long piece. It's about AIDS, and I sold it to somebody who took it to Europe. I don't remember what each piece is about anymore, and it's sort of social justice, but I really don't consider that one to be social justice either. I've also done things about malaria and other aspects of science, but I don't consider them to be social justice. So, to get to the chalice, I wanted to work on a whole series on the grasses. One of my brothers is a scientist. He works with isotopes. He was reconstructing the Earth's atmosphere. He found an interesting point in the evolution of grasses. So I thought that it would be nice to do a whole series. And I talked to a poet, Artis Bernard, and she said, oh, I always wanted to do something about the grasses too. So a few months later, she had pages and pages of really gorgeous poems, and I had nothing, almost. And I read her poems, and they were so beautiful. This is the first one we did. The next image. On the first day, grass created soil, and on all days thereafter, held it together. She also had a poem about a grass seed that looked like a chalice. And so when I made that image, which is the next slide, anyway, that's the chalice seed slide. I did a whole series. There were maybe 20 different images in the series that I did with her poems. This was about the chalice, and Gail Mariner actually owns this particular piece. Well, I had done a smaller piece in regard to the chalice poem, and I thought, you know, I could just, it was in the drawer. I thought, like, all I have to do is add a flame to it and maybe put a little more rainbow color on the side and give it to the church. So I did that. And then this last summer, Ron Cookston asked me to do something more with it. And so I did. There's the image. And I thought all of these pieces I was doing with her had an underpinning of different diagrams. I've got a page of the diagrams here. They're really, really tiny. And this is the diagram that I used for this. And of course, I blew it up. Xerox machines are really wonderful. And after I did this for the church, which I think the color's been enhanced by my friend over at Quick Copy, I asked my son, who is a mathematician, about the meaning of it. I said, I think this really looks like a mathematical diagram. And he gave the most beautiful explanation, which his words were like a poet's words. You can't change a single line. And it is on the back of the card, and it's also on the stair landing framed. It's really lovely. I don't know that there's time for me to read it, but he later told me that this is used by different scientists that work on relativity theory, which it kind of fits with Unitarianism. So I didn't start out as doing anything with social justice or with the Unitarians, but this is the result. So this is the journey of a line from an elephant to this card. So I can read if there's time, I can read it. This diagram looks like it could be a space-time diagram, said my son Louis. Time is the vertical axis. Space is the horizontal axis. The point where the lines intersect represent an event, which is the present moment, at some particular point in space. The diagonal lines represent light traveling to and from the event. The northern region above the intersection point represent future events that could be affected by the present. The southern region represents past events which could affect the present. So, yeah, it's really lovely. So that's the card, and that's the story. So thank you. Oh, yes. Does anyone have questions? Yes?
Not a question, just a statement. We do have these box gift cards that were designed by Penny available in Channing Hall for $25 if you'd like to take home instead. And thank you for the design of those for us, Ms. Penny.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So, yes, Emily?
Talk about when color entered your work.
Oh, yeah. With the color, with that piece, with the
It creeps in and you can say,
right. And I don't use watercolor. Sometimes I do if the paper works right. But I use pastel a lot. And I use pastel, I rub it into the paper and then I can draw on top of the colors. And my parents gave me this one year when they had very little money, and they apologized that they had so little money. This was all they could give me for Christmas, and I still use it. So, yeah, and so there might be some original pastels in there. Oh, and here's a Crocodile pen. I guess I brought it for show and tell. And, but I just add to it all the time if I don't have the right colors. So it was a really good present. And so when you give a child materials, then I was a teenager when they gave this to me. Yeah, you never know. Or putting a Crocodile pen on the list of supplies to buy for high school. You don't know where things are going to go. Oh, and also I was going to say, you, especially if there were any children present, you do not ever need to earn money with your artwork. What you do need to do is figure out the best medium for you to be working in and what you're interested in saying, because art is it's another way of communication. Any other questions?
Question. When I look at your work, I see the incredible detail that you put into it, and I'm imagining you sitting there doing this detailed work, and it almost seems like, do you find yourself going into sort of almost a meditative state doing that, or are you so focused in it that it's not really meditative, but it's more processing?
I don't know. I remember that at some point post-divorce that I thought, gosh, I've gone through such emotional ups and downs, and some of the work that I'm producing is really good. So, I was able to put it aside, I guess, and do the work. So
the pen, the Crocodile pen, I've never heard of that. How is that spelled?
crow, like it's the quill of a crow, except that now it's also, I think, Hunt number 102. So if you wanted to buy it at the store, you'd probably ask for Hunt. I think it's 102. I always keep the end of one of the, I buy it in boxes so that if I destroy them, then I can easily get another one, because they sell them just one at a time at the. Yep. Yeah. Metal. Yeah. No, no, it, at one time when people used quills for writing, then different quills would make different kinds of lines. And so this one is, I guess, supposed to be more closely related to the quill of a crow.
So you said there are the happy accidents and all of your black dots that were in so many of your drawings, were those all happy accidents?
Yeah, because you can take this pen and just scrape it across the paper, and it'll break or it'll spray ink that away, So, once you, well, after 50 years, figure out how to use it, then, you have fun with it. Yeah. Yes? I just, I just finished something that Emily knows about. She's about the only person that's seen it. But I started it in January, and it's a 30. By now, I also work on wood, so I do pen and ink on wood. After I left Little Egypt, I moved to a studio next door to Diverse Works in the warehouse. Actually, I lived in the warehouse too for about 3 years. The build out, because I rented this huge space that had to be built out for 8 artists, and Diverse Works was being built out at the same time. The carpenter happened to be somebody that had just finished working at the MFA as a carpenter, and had a degree from Kansas City Art Institute. And so he was a great help. And I asked him, can I use some of these leftover boards? Because there were so many. And he said, he told me how to prepare it. So since about 1990, I've been working on wood as well as paper. And it's different. It's very different. Yeah. I use I use Reeves BFK mostly Reeves BFK, and sometimes I'll see a really interesting paper in a sketchbook, and so I'll buy the sketchbook and use different papers. And then because I worked for so long in printmaking, I've got a whole drawer of interesting papers that sometimes I use, but I'm most used to using Reeves BFK. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, give her applause. Thank you all for coming out today. I want to invite you back next month. We have another one coming up next month, and it will feature some of Houston's finest poets reading poems that are related to social justice. So I hope to see you back then. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.